Good afternoon and welcome, and good morning to some of those who are dialing in from the States. Welcome to DataZoom's Data Leadership, Wisdom and Insights. And today my guest will be Jason Krantz. I'm Samir Sharma, I'm the CEO of DataZoom, and I run this series with the hope that we can spread knowledge and understanding about the field of data analytics and other fields that are emerging every day, it seems, from artificial intelligence to machine learning, and I will be hosting this show on a monthly basis with a number of different guests from hopefully around the globe. So over to Jason. Jason, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me. I'm glad to be on here.
It's great to have you, really. Jason, I think I probably do you the injustice of introducing you. So let me give a headline. Jason Krantz is the Director of Business Analytics and Insights at Weil, McLean and Marley. I hope I got that right. And is a 40 under 40 in the HVAC industry. So what would be great is if you could tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey from a business analyst to where you are now.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to. So, I'm a big believer that anybody in the analytics and data science space should really have that elevator pitch ready to tell people that don't understand maybe the nature of what we do, what is it that you do. My personal elevator pitch is that I help companies weaponize and monetize their data. And a lot of people ask, why do you focus on that? And I focus on that because there's very frequently, in my opinion, a disconnect between the work that data science, analytics, and other related fields do and what is seen and understood in the executive ranks. And that's not meant to be a negative thing. It's just the nature of what we do tends to be very detailed. And so the reason I have that structure is because it focuses on what is the language that executives and decision makers actually understand. And that's really, in my opinion, the language of finance. And when you think about what data scientists and chief data officers and everybody is doing, is the goal, the reason for being there is to help drive business performance, at least in most corporate settings. There are clearly going to be academic arenas where academic research is essential. But for most of us, probably most of the people listening to this, it is a business purpose that we are there for. And so speaking the language of finance and really focusing on how do we take data assets and analytical capabilities and bridge that to the finance side jumps over that frequent communication barrier. I'll just give you a quick example.
Sure, go ahead.
As I go through. The second one that I look at, the second bullet here is, you look at $200 million in revenue impact and operating profit to $20 million. The question I get every single time when I say that is, how do you do that from the analytical seat? And the way that we frame up our team is that we personally are not, in most cases, are not directly driving, like on the sales side. We're not out there actually selling the product, but what we do, and this is, I think, a really big opportunity for analytic professionals in general to work on kind of how they frame, how they contribute value, is we are business partners with the sales team. We are business partners with the marketing team, with the finance team, with the operations team. And really what we do is we help identify opportunities. And then what we do is we frame opportunities using data. We bring skills to the table that these particular groups don't have, and then we attack a problem from two sides. So a lot of times, from the business analytics side, we ask first, what is the business objective? What problem are we trying to solve? And then what we do is we get clarity because we're working on this problem with the business. We're crystal clear on the problem we're trying to solve. I'm sure you've seen it. I know earlier in my career I've done it numerous times where I thought I understood the problem. I didn't have the first clue on the problem I was trying to solve, or I misunderstood it, or the business person misarticulated it. You're laughing because we've all been there.
We've been there, yeah. I think there's...
And so... Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to say, I think there's something there about also the fact that coming from a business perspective as opposed from a very technical perspective.
Yes.
But you've had both. You've had the chance to exist in that technical world, and you know, from looking at your career, you've done quite a lot of development. So you've had to have you had to reshape your brain and the way that you communicate through that? How have you done that?
Yes, yeah, definitely. Well, it's really interesting because anybody who knows me can attest to this. I'm very extroverted. I like being in front of people. That's the social side of me. But the way my brain works, I'm a finance guy at heart. And so I love numbers. I love data. And so what I found is a very unique niche where I can do a lot of the programming. I could do some pretty hardcore stuff on the technical side. And at this point in my career, I'm more building and leading teams that do that. But as you know, one of the big challenges in building really capable teams in that regard is that if you've got a data science leader of a very capable team, but they've never done data science, that's a really big hurdle to overcome because how do you coach and mentor those people? Additionally, I found that I could take these really smart kids or really smart professionals and help them develop their Python or R or SQL or whatever approach that help develop an algorithm or whatever. But then I say, okay, cool, you've done the technical stuff. Now let's expand the scope of your skills by focusing on how do we communicate this? How do we make this digestible for the business? Because there's one case in particular where and I wrote about this on LinkedIn recently, where a gentleman had done a very robust statistical analysis, and I said, okay, I'm going to give you the chance to present in front of the executive team. Get your stuff together. Let's review. We reviewed, and then we went in there, and the discussion right away went to statistics. And in our audience, our customer completely glazed over. We totally you're talking p-values and just And this is where I very frequently see analytics and technically minded people get lost because, again, it's you'll see me anytime I write, it's about customer centricity. Who is our customer? What is their perspective? What do they care about? And really at its core, why should they care about what we're saying? Because if you really break it down, in my opinion, we're trying to get them to change the way that they behave and use information as an asset to drive decision-making. And if you think about that, there's a very significant comfort in change management. Change management and understanding component to that is that if we're presenting content in a manner that they don't understand or aren't comfortable with, they're not going to use it. They're not going to change. And that's just a fundamental part of being human. So that's what I see as one of the single greatest challenges for not only my team, but I would say most analytics professionals and teams in general is packaging, what you can as effectively as possible so that when you bring it, present it to a non-data audience, they can understand it. And that at its core is the backbone of why I'm so passionate about data literacy. There's a divide there.
Yeah, no, I can definitely hear that, Jason. I just want to track back to one thing that you said earlier, though, and it goes back to the statement right at the beginning about weaponizing and monetizing data. Now, a lot of people that I will go and meet with, either through business or when I'm speaking, and when I talk about monetization of data, they sort of become quite the hairs on their back go up, basically, because they have an idea or an image that data monetization is a bad thing, that we're selling data. But from your perspective, and it isn't that, I know that, but it takes a while for people to come back down to the point of, I see what you mean by data monetization. In your words, in your simple way of delivering and conveying information to a senior executive, how would you explain data monetization? Because it's something that keeps coming up continuously. People ask me, you see a lot of posts on LinkedIn about this. What is your take on data monetization?
Yeah, I'll start by for anybody interested in this topic. My Bible is really Doug Laney's book, Infonomics. He's got a phenomenal write-up on this topic. If anybody's really interested in this topic, I really highly recommend that book. Now, with that out of the way, because that's kind of my Bible, I look at it in two different ways. Is I look at it, one, data monetization of. I look at that from an internal revenue, business development, channel development perspective, because I spent a vast majority of my career actually working with sales forces. So It's a really weird combination. Tech guy with finance background that works with sales forces, unique. So I look at that. How can we use our internal data to generate additional market insights or pricing trends or whatever it is to drive top-line revenue? Top-line revenue is definitely one of them. Another major one is price management. A lot of people, especially in the data science space, don't realize how potent of a profit lever price management can be. And there are some very obviously digital native firms like Amazon that understand this. It's incredibly potent. But my lens of that is really price management too. So those are two kind of internal channels to data monetization. But then the third one is that it's actually the brokering and sharing of information, getting access to information that you normally wouldn't be able to buy. And I have personally done this numerous times where it's like, hey, I've got some data that you might be interested in. What do you have that I might be interested in? And it can be a trade. Obviously, you're not breaking any internal or external rules in doing this, but if you can take your data and make it anonymous, there are numerous ways. There are probably numerous consumers for your data that would be interested in that information, and likely they'll have something that they would like to trade with you. And as I said, Doug's book, he outlines numerous different ways to go down that, but those are kind of the three main ones that I look at. Yeah.
I agree, and I think it's very simple the way you've put it. The other area is give me, and I think a lot of the listeners who come onto this show always want to hear practical examples of how you've done this. So when you talk about 200 million, and those are pretty big numbers. Those numbers, as you said earlier, well, how you guys aren't salespeople. You're not at the forefront of what's happening in marketing or whatever. So give me an example of where you have taken data, maybe internal, mixed it or mashed it up with some external data, and have been able to drive revenue, that top line revenue, to either drive sales or whatever it might be. Just give us an example of what you did and what impact that made to the people and in the organization, and how it maybe dislodged some of the myths behind data and data-driven culture.
Yes, absolutely. So there's lots of examples I can give, but I'll give one of probably the most relatable to the broadest audience is request for proposals. So we have a customer that sells a product or a category that's similar to ours. So sales says, hey, we've got an opportunity to win $10 million here, or $5 million, or $80 million, whatever it is. We need help putting the bid together. So what we do is we'll sit down and we'll say, okay, this is where we're sitting side by side with the business. Says, what's the plan here? What are we looking to do? And then once we outline what we're looking to do, it becomes what questions do we need to have answered. And so a lot of times what we'll do is we'll go, okay, we're going to go to this site, and I'll give you, or I think a very relatable example is we're going to go to this site. We're going to look at the types of products that they sell. What we're also going to do on behalf of the sales team, this is my team doing all of this in conjunction with, checkpoints with the business. So say, okay, site X, but what are 10 other sites that are similar to this? And let's go look at the product portfolios that they have on their sites. So what we do now is we've got the target site with 10 other very closely related sites. And now what we'll do is we'll scrape product data and pricing and attributes and other data off of the web. Okay, cool. Now we've scraped all this data off the web. Now the real work starts. Of okay, we got to map competitive products to our equivalent, right? In terms of all the attributes that they've got. So product ABC is the same as R123. Cool. We've done this mapping now. Now, the pricing, we can compare the pricing, from where we need to be at versus where the market is at. That's the great thing about e-commerce. It's great price transparency. So now that's kind of looking at, okay, what's out there on the web. Then we look at, okay, who are the competitors that manufacture this product? What business and market intelligence do we have on them? Are they going to have a cost advantage to us? Do they produce more of this product than us? If they have a cost advantage, what might their margin profile be? And again, this is where we're mashing up the technical stuff with the finance lens.
Yes.
So now we're coming here as we're saying, okay, customer 123 on product ABC is at price point $100. We're guessing they're at 30% margin. So if they're at 30% margin, this reseller is selling it online for $150. So they're making Y margin. And then we know that they like to make, we know that they like to make 50% all the time. So if they sell at 50%, what price point is that going to put us at in the market?
Right.
So now this is all work. This is all a build-up. This is all the background work that goes into what price are we going to.
You guys are continuously doing this with the sales guys as well. You are driving this data in front of them. And how are you presenting this data?
Again, we distill it down to what matters to them. We say, listen, here's the intelligence. Here's the 10 SKUs that we're going to build. Here's the comparative analysis of site A, B. So usually what we'll do is we'll say, here's our product. Here's a competitive product. Here's all the sites that they're at, and here's the price point that they're at. Okay. If we bid this, what price would they put online, essentially?
I got you.
Yeah. So it's pretty cool. So now what we do is
pretty granular in that sense. Yeah.
It is, and you need to do that to go into this. All comes down to what price can we bid with confidence, knowing full well we're giving it a good shot to win the business. Because a lot of times people will go in, they'll just be like, I think this will work, or this might work. And what we're saying is that, and that right there is the delta between the legacy way of doing things and bidding and the newer way of bidding. So what happens is when you're taking this more structured approach, you statistically are improving the probability that, one, you're putting a good price on the table, but two, you're not leaving margin on the table. And that's the ultimate goal of all of this, is that win the business at the So that's a revenue side. That's a revenue side generator. Lots of examples of that. And when you stack all those up together, you win $10 million through the bid. Whatever it may be.
Completely understand it, and I think it's not done enough in terms of in the sales cycle, and within that sort of from an RFP context, that's an interesting use case for me. So I will have that in the back of my head, because I do like that. I want to come to something that you're writing about at the moment, and it probably goes back to what you were talking about earlier in the context of communications and language. You talk about data literacy. And it seems to be that you're very passionate about data literacy at the moment. Yes. Give us a helicopter tour of data literacy in terms of definition, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, data literacy, the one sentence that I like to use for that is kind of knowing what data is and how to use it to drive decisions. It's obviously much deeper than that, but the reason for my passion in this is after spending years developing, implementing BI platforms, trying to convert people to what I saw as a clearly better way of doing things and more efficient, really, because it saves them effort and brings standardization. A lot of times there was still a disconnect in terms of it didn't get the adaptation that I thought it would or that I thought it should. I'm sitting there like, this is going to make your life easier. And I kept stepping back and trying to answer the question of why? Why isn't this clicking? And as I started to interview people more, because I do that a lot, I say, listen, talk to me straight about what's going on here. Why don't you use it? A lot of the times it came down to understanding, just a fundamental understanding of listen, this is a big change, or I perceive this as a big change. I don't understand it. And at its core, I couldn't answer the question effectively of why should I change, right? At its core, that's what change management is all about.
Yeah.
And I couldn't answer that appropriately. And as I dug deeper, it came down to the theme of people just didn't understand how this was going to help them. And so that's where, as I talked to more analytics professionals, I saw that this was an immensely common thread of, you know, you develop an amazing algorithm, or, you know, there's just this amazing analytical tool, and it collects dust. And so, you know, it comes down to many factors. Some of it is marketing, you know, internal marketing, but really at its core is the clarity of how is this going to help you. And so, you know, I realized this really within probably about the past year and a half to 2 years. And it's just only recently I started to write on this topic and talk with others about this topic, because I think it is a really critical bridge from the technical data science analytical world over to the business executive and results world. You know, there is a communication gap there. And I think data literacy can help. And in my mind, that's a two-way bridge. It's one, it's the non-data professionals developing the comfort to, you know, work with and understand data, but it's also the technical people to understand where is your customer's head at. Because, you know, like if somebody talks about, you know, a random tree forest or something to me, I'm like, yeah, I get that. But my customer might not have the first clue what I'm talking about. And so it's just that understanding, you know, it's the understanding of, you know, how do we talk the same language? And again, it gets to the theme of communication, which is, I think it's prevalent in all human interactions, very important in all human interactions, but especially here. And I was actually having this conversation the other day. The reason why I'm writing and focusing a lot on it now is that, you know, when computers first came out in corporate America, you know, people looked at it like probably, oh, that's a neat toy. But computer literacy wasn't really a big deal. Flash, you know, it comes to today, you look at it, in a corporate setting, if you do not have computer literacy, I would argue it's very difficult to get a job. My belief is that being that we are in such a digital age today, in the same way that when the computer first came on board, we're in that same phase in data literacy. I believe that in the future, data literacy is going to be table stakes to be employable. I think we're many years out from that, but I really genuinely do believe that, and we've seen parallel activities like that. Like I said, with the computer being one of those.
So with that said, and I think we've come quite far in terms of data. I still, from my experiences and the work that we do, certainly about maybe 2 years ago, I probably had the same epiphany as you, in the sense that, you know, we would often be asked in by specific customers to come and review what they've done so far, and I use this term, which you said, you know, lots of maybe algorithms or dashboards have been created, but they sit in what I call a dashboard graveyard, because there's a lot out there that's never used. Yeah. So we actually then decided to why is that? What's the reason for this? And I think that the clear distinction, what you're talking about, is the breakdown of communications between a technical person who has driven or created a dashboard that they think is absolutely viable and a beautiful, you know, a work of art, and then the business person who looks at it and says, I don't have the foggiest of what to do. So, you know, we created this tool, which was what I really found. Forget the dashboard, or forget. It was really from what you said earlier, that the user didn't have the knowledge of what they needed to do when they saw the dashboard. What was that action they needed to take? So very quickly we built this thing around bridging that gap, basically, and it's called a decision map. So you basically take the user on a journey of, listen, if you're going to take data and you're going to use it, you've got to understand what you're going to apply it for. and the purposes, etc. So you attach that to it, and you use that as the link in the chain to ensure that they understand when they see a number that they'll understand why they're making that decision and for what purpose. So I think it's almost, we came out around this point of whether, I don't know, I mean, I've never used the term before, but purpose-driven data or the actions that one creates. How do you in Weil McLean, how have you embedded that into the day-to-day business? How has that changed the perceptions around data? Because data literacy is quite a wide field, because it covers change management. It covers how developers will sit and code and convey certain bits of information to people. It looks at the executives and how they view data. I'm just wondering, from a practical sense, how have you done that, either at Weil McLean or at other places? That change management piece is still a struggle that I see most organizations dealing with.
So you bring up a phenomenal point, and this will transcend any workplace I've been at. This has kind of been my playbook, and I've learned it over time. But what I've found, and I think this is true in a lot of areas of life, but less is more, right? So because the idea is like, I'll be totally transparent. My first inclination is to go and throw a bunch of stuff at these guys, right? Here's all the ways you can cut it. Here's what you can do. Look at this. Look at this cut. This tells you so much. In the hands of like my team or me or another data scientist, whatever, it's a very powerful tool. But again, customer centricity. We look at who is our customer and where are they at in that journey. And for a lot of the workforce I worked with, they're early in that journey. So it's kind of like when you're first starting out, any new skill. You can't jump to advanced right away. You got to start out with the basics, with the really simple, and execute on those perfectly. So what I like to do is get with the executive team, outline the goal of, okay, guys, here's the objective. Current state, we got stuff everywhere. Nobody's looking at the same metrics in the same way. From a sales perspective, everybody's winging their sales pitches. Not that it's bad, but everybody has a different way. So we look at, okay, how can we standardize? How can we simplify? And what are those core metrics and views that we want to focus on? Because we're going to focus on that. And the idea with that approach is that we fully realize when we're creating this, we're not going to meet the needs for all the people all the time. That's impossible. But what we say is that we're going to meet the needs of 80% of the people 80% of the time.
Absolutely.
And we're going to save them a lot of time and effort. And so this is where anybody who's listening to this will crack up at this, that's worked with me, is that a lot of times I'll say no. I'll say, like, listen, this is a standard that we agreed to. It's these 3 or 4 perspectives. And this is the key point. We have executive buy-in that this is the path that we're going to take. We've already aligned with the executive team, right? That's a really, really, really important point, because it makes it much easier to say no and have consistency in this approach. And then what we do is we focus on the tactical execution and utilization of these couple core base reports, right? So again, I'm going to use the sales perspective. How can we start getting the sales team to use this universal view that everybody looks at it the same way? So now you can start to develop scalable solutions, right? Whether you have a sales force of 4 or 400, you're deploying the exact same solution, and that helps manage expectations. But not only that, as you do your training and you start to socialize, here's how it's going to help and here's why it helps, you're socializing to a very small number of outputs, which is 2 or 3 core reports, right? So now, again, you have scalability on the training front. And this is really important. I think this point gets lost a lot. And I'm not going to lie. The sales forces will frequently come to me and be like, Jason, I need this particular view to do my job. And I'll respectfully disagree, but I can completely rationalize where they're coming from, because they're used to doing things. Again, it gets to change management. They're used to doing things a certain way.
Yeah.
So a lot of times what we like to do is we like to parallel path. We'll give them the old products but then we will also give them the new product. And we'll say, okay, we know that you like to look at it this way in this report. Here's how you get the same output in this report. And not only that, here's how it can help facilitate a conversation when you go to visit your customer. Not only that, this report might have taken you 15 minutes to develop on your own or put together. You can get it in 10 seconds here. So this is where it's like, what's in it for them? How do they create value? But plus two, the hope is that, one, it takes them away from a non-value add activity. You have salespeople to sell, not to make reports.
Correct.
But the other thing is, two, is that if you can get that confidence there, it gives them, more confidence when they walk in to see a customer. And again, I keep coming back to sales because sales is a very potent avenue for an analytics or data science team to show value, right? If you're helping the sales team, nothing happens if there's no sales. We're not employed if we don't have sales.
No, absolutely. So let's cut over to the team angle. You run a team, but you've also clearly come from a technical background. Today, data scientists, data engineers, now we've got machine learning engineers. What would you say to students today who are thinking about going on that journey? What do you think they need to know and need to understand and need to learn as part of that journey to get to that endpoint? Because we all know there's a shortage of these types of resources, and it's just that gap is growing continuously. What advice would you give them for what they should be looking at and learning today?
No, I love this theme because I love having these conversations with young professionals or starting their careers. My comments are going to be this is a really big contextual point. My comments are going to be from my lens of the world, which is very business centric. The advice will clearly differ for somebody who's looking to go deep into AI or statistics. So that's a really big contextual point. But the advice that I give all the younger people I work with is continue what you're doing in terms of developing technical skills, right? Build those technical skills. This is the time to develop them because they're the anchor point for when you go further in your career. It becomes harder to develop these skills. Not that you can't do it, but it's harder. With that, I really encourage everybody to focus on clearly articulating how you create value. What is it that sets you apart? Because I'm not going to lie, I know a million people that could code in R or, a million people that can code in Python. What sets you apart from everybody else that does what you do? And in my opinion, you got to have that story. Now, again, I fully realize in other industries, other verticals, whatever it may be, that story is totally different. But my view, I ask this to people all the time. I got 10 people that could do what you do, and I don't mean that in a derogatory sense, but why should I hire you? What sets you apart? And this is where I really think for younger people to focus on their communication skills, because that is incredibly scarce, in my opinion, in this particular line of work. Technical skills are everywhere. Communication skills are quite scarce. And I always say is if you can do the technical, you can do the statistics, and you can tell a story and communicate it, you are dangerous. You're incredibly dangerous. You're going to be able to make your own path.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that sentiment. I had forgotten to mention something to the people on the call. There's a little box here which they can pose a question to Jason. I will pick those questions up. So please do ask your questions if you would like to. I'm going to cut to something light now, Jason. I just to go back to the point around those professionals starting their careers, I completely agree with you. I think that fundamentally, technical skills can be taught very simply, but it's the language skills, it's the conveying of information to a wider audience which people struggle, and I see that a lot. But I want to go to 40 under 40. How did that come about? And tell us a little bit more about HVAC.
Yes, absolutely. So I'll start with HVAC. HVAC is, our particular line of work. We make boilers and other heating products, but HVAC as an industry is massive. You're probably never, ever anywhere more than 10 feet from some kind of HVAC product, even in your car.
Sure.
They have heating elements and cooling, things like that. So a very, very, very large industry. Now, in the United States, again, not meant in a derogatory way, but it's in general lagging behind other industries in their technological advancement.
Okay.
So when I was brought into this role, we were looking to develop analytical capabilities to obviously get competitive advantages. And so the reason how that award came about is because we were doing a lot of really good things that were driving real tangible results, financially speaking. But more importantly, we were changing the way that we were really doing business. I actually had no idea that I was even nominated for it, so when I got it, it was a heck of a surprise. I'm like, hey, surprise.
What a great accolade.
Yeah. So it was really cool. But in this, it sounds corny, but the thing is that as I stated to the individuals that nominated me for this, I didn't really do a whole lot. I just put together a really good team that did a lot of the work. And so, like I said, I was like, when I got this award, it was really more the team's award than mine, because they're the ones that are really making a lot of stuff happen. I just, it's like I'm trying to be a good manager, hire great people, get the heck out of their way, give them the support that they need, and coach and mentor wherever possible. Obviously, I might still hop in and do some Python or SQL coding from time to time, but it was really their award.
Fantastic. Well, it's an amazing talent that you have. Certainly getting the best out of people. You talked about digitization earlier on, and going back to something that is on the on every brow, on every news channel, on every article that I read is the digital world. Where is an industry like Weil McLean, and in particular, how are they using some of the newer data type of, let's say, techniques like machine learning and like AI, and is that something that you're exposed to? And also, I realize that you can't give away secrets as well, because that would be give an unfair competitive. There'd be some issues. But tell us a little bit about how you're using more of the more advanced techniques.
Yeah. So the big one, which I can talk about right now, is really IoT. IoT is a really big one. I spoke on this at 2 different conferences also. But I speak at it about it from the lens of an organization that is early in the process, right? So we're learning. We're learning as we're going. But just to give you some context for how we use it, boilers are pretty long life products. A cast iron boiler could easily last 15 years. They'll usually last much longer than that. So usually around 30 years actually. And what you're looking for there is, with that long of a life cycle, you're looking at building management system integration on the commercial front. So we call it BMS. It's where basically a central software program, AI, whatever it is, will manage comfort in the building. So we're looking at, how do we integrate with those systems, which is something we're doing. But then also it's, how do you use this for preventative maintenance and performance management? And this is where you start to get into down the road machine learning and AI components of it, where when you look at the performance data trends, it can do exception-based or alert-based notifications to your customer, which can then trigger a contractor to come out and do maintenance work. So you're calling out a $70 maintenance job versus a couple $1,000 boiler replacement because you're being proactive in the maintenance cycle. It's very similar to in your car's maintenance light goes on. Better to do the maintenance and change the oil than to blow up your engine. So really, again, what I can talk about is the IoT side of things, and then down the road, I think that will lead to machine learning, AI, and things like that to help maintain those products longer and better.
Yeah, and I get that. I think predictive maintenance, certainly predictive proactive maintenance, is something that will make it more efficient, and those specific heaters or whatever, last longer. But certainly the way that things are going in terms of how things are speaking to each other, and the sensors that you can apply to these, and the amount of data that's collected. Are you building new architectures around that, or is that something that's still in its infancy?
Actually, I'm not going to talk about that.
Okay.
Sorry, I can't talk about that. Yeah.
All right. All right. I'm gonna. We have a question. I'm gonna stop the screen for one moment and have a look at the question.
Let me see. Where's the question?
Let me see what. Let's see. I always ask the question.
Oh, there's the question. Okay.
Yeah. There's a question coming, so I'm just gonna have a look at that.
You want to take the FC one?
So.
Oh yes, marketing.
Yeah. So what do you think about the importance of data in marketing and its future for marketers? Interesting. That's to both of us, so I'll let you go first.
Definitely. I think as it has been, I think it's incredibly important. I think it really is the backbone of understanding your customer and what they like, what they're engaging with. Obviously, with the regulation around privacy, I think the U.S. is kind of exploring now too something similar to what they did in Europe. Obviously, it's going to have an impact on the ability to collect that type of data. But I still think at its core, it's immensely important. Me personally, I haven't worked as much lately with that deep, Google Analytics and other related website and search, marketing data. But there's no doubt that it is immensely important for understanding what are your customers looking for, what do they want, and then once they find what they want, how often are they picking, are they seeing and connecting with your marketing, which ultimately manifests itself in the form of a purchase.
Yeah. I agree with that. I think the kind of things that I'm seeing, in particular in the marketing space, I think marketers are getting better at data, but I think what's lacking and what's still an issue is the integration of data across the marketing channels. And that's always been something that's hampered marketers. But I do believe that, certainly from the work that our team does, that we're seeing better use cases around the use of data in marketing. But specifically, I think we're getting beyond the metrics around cost per acquisition and conversion rates and so on. I'm hoping that we're beyond that. Certainly, I see that from our customers that we're beyond that. But I think we're getting more now into really understanding the behaviors of the customers across the different channels. And that's becoming quite important from the work that we're doing. So a lot of customers are doing that micro-segmentation, and they're really trying to understand from a group of people across a number of channels, not doing lookalikes, but really what are the behaviors across those channels, and what other areas are they touching that give us an idea of what they're doing, where they are in their life journey, and in particular in products like insurance and banking. That's a very, very interesting space to be in. And marketers, I think, from that perspective, are probably still behind, and are still worried about net promoter scores and things like that, which I think, that they've got to come away from. But certainly, going down to that customer lifetime value and doing much better targeted segmentation is still something that is that I would say is heavily important. And probably coming back to what you said earlier around the sales agents and channels, that's also a highly effective place where data should be used, particularly in the handoff and that sort of handoff between sales and marketing. That's a specific place. But you can take it up to the level of from marketing, you can take it up to the level of ad tech, and certainly start looking at the amount of impressions and impression analytics and optimizing digital campaigns. I mean, those are where they need to be getting to. But I think that's a place where they are still lacking, and it's quite a specific area where there are very cute algorithms that we've built which can allow marketers to really refine the amount that they're bidding on, and the cost of conversion versus the customer value is huge in that sense once you start to actually optimize those channels. But I think from my point that's where I think marketing is going. I don't think chatbots and things like that are actually are going to be the game changer there. I don't think so. I think it's going to be heavily personalization and really understanding the behavior and instincts of the customer. But that's going to evolve, I think. The second question I've had is by Ben. So how do you deal with the adoption process of new tools, particularly BI? I'll throw that one at you, Jason.
Oh yeah, I got a really simple playbook for this. Find the guy that hates your platform the most and go convert him. Give him the white glove treatment, buy him lunch, send him a card at Christmas, whatever you got to do, but find the biggest, just the person that hates your solution the most resistant to change, and convert them. When you do that, you have an advocate, the most powerful advocate that you could spend years marketing and trying to convert your users. If you convert that one guy, he's going to do all the marketing and conversion for you. That is a really, really common problem. I personally have experienced it numerous times. I still experience it. And that, in general, is my playbook. It doesn't work every time, but it certainly, at bare minimum, develops a good relationship with that person. But I would say, in my experience, 90 to 95% of the time, that works, and then you get a cheerleader for your solution, which is great because then you get scalability for marketing of why your solution works.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I should have continued what Ben the statement Ben mentioned afterwards. But I think there's a couple of things here from my perspective. I completely agree with your, take that person out for lunch and send them a Christmas card and birthday cards and so on. I think this. Honestly, I mean, sometimes that is the only way. The comfort level that Ben talks about in terms of Excel, I think that's a huge factor.
Yes.
And where I think it's going to become, I think you've touched on it earlier, to be honest. There's a moment in time where a user is perhaps taking 3 hours to create something, which in fact it should take 10 seconds to do once the data has been optimized and it's been cleaned and it's been transformed and it's been put into a platform which is accessible. But I think the adoption process of those new tools also comes back down to that simplicity factor.
Yes.
And where I've talked about, Ben mentions the dashboard graveyard, where I've talked about that, I think it's I think it's specifically around the fact that you and people use the statement "keep it simple." I think it's really around that factor of keeping it absolutely simple. I'll give you an example. We recently worked with a customer and we were working at the executive level, and the set of dashboards that they had for their key metrics, they had 17 metrics on one dashboard. And I looked at it and I thought, how on earth are you supposed to discern what to do? And do you really run your business like that? And I realized it's not the way they run it, and they don't think like that. So we actually mapped their thought process and then mapped that to what they'd look at and the way that they would make a decision based on the information that they were presented with. And we whittled it down to 5 key metrics, and with a drill down factor, but they instantly got it. They understood. It was more emotional than logical, in the sense that emotional, they could connect it to it. So just breaking it down into its bare components and asking the question, why do you need that? And why is that of use to you? Actually challenging somebody is a good way of getting them to give you the real answer. But that's some part of the adoption of new tools. I think there's the other portion, which is not ripping things away from people. Excel will always be there. No one can get rid of it.
Yep.
But we have to be careful about people doing their own analysis. But I think it is giving people the flexibility to really understand how quickly they can get to insights when they use something that's standardized and easy and quick. And it's building that incremental value into the organization that helps. And it's showing value early that hooks people.
Yeah. Oh, huge.
And I think that's one of the most important factors where people will start to understand the value and the time that they're losing in the way that they are inefficient and unproductive.
Yeah. I think you're spot on.
Sorry.
Sorry.
No. You go ahead. I finished my response.
I think I wanted to touch on your Excel piece because you're right. The reality is you're never going to take Excel away. So rather than trying to fight it, embrace it. And even myself, I use Excel a ton. But what I wanted to comment on is that I'm kind of smiling as I think about this. Is that this is a conversation around data and analytics. But think about how much we've actually talked about people, process, and change.
Yes.
Which I think is, really, you break it down at its core. That's what this is about. Is in this, it gets back to just kind of how do you make the technology work? And that's why I always say it. I don't think it's about the technology. Yeah, the technology is unquestionably important.
Of course.
But it's
of course.
How do you address these topics that we've been talking about to get it to weaponize it? Right. This is really at the core what the weaponization is about, is getting it to be used.
I completely agree with that, and it's one of the things that is a continuous evolutionary process in my mind, and in particular in the work that we do. We always have to continue to challenge the work that we do as well. We also have to go back and say, well, why did we do that? What was the sense in that? And then realizing that. But I do often go back to the point that if you're not purpose-driven in analytics, in data, and whatever it might be, you're not actually going to get the right results. So, I know it sounds sort of quite out there, but when a developer sits down and starts to work through to build something that's going to be of use to an end user, they have to consider the purpose of why they're doing it. And only then can they really understand why they're doing it and what it's going to achieve from a business outcome. If they don't get that, then you're never going to get to that point where it's going to be a good tool. It's going to be used and it's going to be onboarded very, very successfully. So I think there's, it goes back to something you said earlier. It's got to have the principles behind it, where the technicalities are there. We don't need to go deeply into the technicalities, but it's more the business side needs to be focused on, and that really needs to be understood in such a way by that technical person that they can relate to it and understand why the sales guy needs that, or why the marketing person needs that, or why various different departments need it. So I think it's essential from that aspect that they really understand what's happening within the business context. We're coming to the top of the hour, and with that said, I'd love to continue more, and I think you and I could speak all day about these things, Jason. And as you said quite succinctly, we've covered quite a lot. Jason Krantz, I'd like to thank you so much for being on the show today. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you, and hopefully we can do this again.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for having me, and it was a phenomenal conversation.
Pleasure, and thank you all for attending. I will send out details of when this will be posted, and I'll update you with our next guests. Thank you again, Jason. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.